On this episode of the Camp Owners Podcast, Howie and I have Professor Dave on, Dave Malter, who is a camp guy through and through. He has an awesome origin story of how he got into camping, and he is bringing his professorship. He just got his doctorate, congratulations, to us on this episode and sharing his knowledge about high performing teams. I took some fantastic notes about asking our staff questions, asking what they are interested in, what they're into, how they want to learn. Questions that we can ask them about when they're at their best, when they're at their worst, getting our leadership teams involved in that, and really using our alumni staff to help spread that message of camp. So lots of great takeaways from Dave. Howie and I hope you enjoy this episode, and we really enjoyed having Dave and might need to have him back. So enjoy. We can't wait to hear your feedback.
Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We are going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Hi, everyone. My name is Howie Grossinger. I'm the co-owner of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto, and a co-owner of Camp Walden, about 3 hours north of Toronto, a sleepover camp.
Hi, everyone. I am Kelly Shuna. I am the co-owner and executive director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp, located in Stillwater, Minnesota. If you are looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and thinking, I love this show so much, and so would others, you can encourage your other camp friends, owners, directors, etc., to find us on their favorite podcast app, and then just send them a note. Say, you love this. So that's great. We love new listeners. We love going to conferences, don't we, Howie? And when people recognize your voice, or they're like, I think I know you, it's super fun. So we're always happy to have our long-term listeners and new listeners as well. So yes, that's great. Hi, Howie. How are you today?
I'm good, Kelly. It's great to be back together recording another episode. We've got a great topic to discuss today for sure. This episode will find our listeners sometime just before the new year. So a lot of people are getting busy to celebrate the holidays with families, with their family. We are in the midst of just staffing, like many of us are these days. Kelly, you are busy with about to launch registration. I would imagine by the time this gets going, I would see pretty soon. You're knee deep into organizing the launch, are you not?
Yes, at this time when people are listening, yes. But currently, I'm basically Joe Biden. I'm working on the infrastructure of my camp. So this topic is super timely because I am having to build some extra infrastructure. So I'm like Kelly Biden right now, trying to do that before we take off for the next year. So this is awesome. I'm super excited. So thank you for coordinating this, Howie.
Hey, no problem. So are you like on a backhoe somewhere on the property? Are you like digging stuff? Like what's going on there?
Listen, Howie, I know how to drive a Bobcat now. Like, I'm kind of a big deal. I mean, I basically told my husband, like, all I really need to do now is perfect the chainsaw. And if something happens to you,
Oh my
like,
gosh.
I could make it. I could continue to like do this,
I am
until a
so
backup.
impressed.
Until there's a backup option, but who really wants a camp lady and 3 kids in a camp? But anyway, no, I'm on my theoretical Bobcat, Howie. I'm putting another layer in my org chart of people. Nice. So that's the phase I'm in right now.
I love that. I was fully anticipating the Hidden Pines Ranch Instagram account just blowing up with you doing some really amazing things on the property, but maybe that'll come one day. Who knows?
Yep.
Kelly, we've got a great topic today. We've got a wonderful guest. I've been hoping to get this person on the show for a while. So to set it up, I just want to tell our listeners that there's no doubt that all of us are constantly looking to make our teams better, whether it's the addition of personnel who add fresh ideas, the reorganization of our team structure and roles, or an examination of how team members interact and communicate with one another. It's something I know we're all constantly thinking of. Ultimately, our goal is to create the highest functioning team possible. We are really excited to have Professor Dave Malter here who's an educator, trainer, and lifelong camp guide to share his thoughts and insights on the topic. Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Your first visit to the Camp Owners podcast. We are excited to have you.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, Kelly and Howie. It's very nice to be here. I could just listen to you two talk all day. That was really fun. That little intro. That was great.
Well,
Yeah,
I think we should call you Dr. Dave, right? I mean, your Zoom
uh,
name should be Dr. Dave, I think.
There has been some discussion of rebranding, but at this point, I don't know. I like the Professor Dave. But yes, I am now a doctor. You are correct.
yes. Well, congratulations on that. And
Thank you.
I know, Dave, we recently got an opportunity to hang out at a great conference that you helped organize overseas through Camp Leaders, and the great group that staffs many of our camps in the US. So I just wanted to thank you for all your efforts and your team for putting that together. If you have a chance in the future, a little plug for Camp Collab. Just
Yeah.
we'll talk. We may talk about that a little later in the show. But Dave, thank you for all of that. It was great. It was a great event. But I was inspired by Dave. Not only at Tri-State last year, but also at Camp Collab about some of the topics that I think are really close to his heart and on his mind, but I know for many of our listeners, and that's the whole idea of culture and teams and building the best possible teams that we can. But before we get into some of the conversation on that, Dave, one of the traditions on this show is to share your origin story, just a little brief Marvel movie kind of origin story for Professor Dave. How did you get started? How do you end up on this show right now? It's definitely not because we're paying you a lot of money, but it's definitely because you've got an incredible resume. So Dave, go for it. Tell us about your life in camp.
Wow. I'll try and keep it short. So day camp kid for a really long time. When I was 13, I became what was then known as one of the maintenance boys at my day camp, which I think would be a maintenance person today, but maintenance boy. And then if you were really good at that, when you were 13, you became the head maintenance boy, which I followed in my brother's footsteps, which meant that I got the bike to ride around camp and pick up the garbage. And now while I might be 6'2", like, 190-ish these days, at 13, I was probably 5'6" and 90-ish, kind of a small, scrawny kid. So that was when I was 13 going into 14. And then that camp director left. And the summer that I turned 15, I got a phone call during the year from the new camp director named Jonathan Gold, that he was coming in to run day camp that I'd grown up at, and he was going to start a special needs division. And he'd heard a lot about me, and that I was going to be a counselor for that special needs division. Now, at this point, I had not worked with kids before. I remember I was maintenance boy 1 and 2. And I said, okay, that's just the kind of kid I was. I just said, sure. And I then spent several years working as a special needs counselor and had some just amazing moments and opportunities and learning experiences and tough times in that role. I started a program in the winter at the what was then the YMYWHA in New York, in Pleasantville, New York, near where I grew up. I started a winter program for those kids where we did dances and pizza parties and magicians and field trips to kind of keep them social and getting to know each other. And it's something I just fell in love with camp. Went to college, grad school. While I was in grad school, I got a job working with Roz and Jed Buck, kind of as a almost full-time person, like 6 months out of the year, I would say. Spent a lot of time with them. Then I started working at the American Camp Association as somebody who helped with Tri-State, and decided I wanted to be a full-time camp person. And just so happened that somebody that I grew up with at that day camp named Gary just gotten hired to be the director of a day camp in New Jersey. And we'd known each other since we were 7. We were at that point well into our 30s. And the owner of the camp, believe it or not, was Jonathan Gold, who was my first real boss at the age of 15, who made me become a special needs counselor. So I started working with Gary, did that for 5 years, realized that camp was my passion, but so was higher education. And I started working for a master's program in camp administration and leadership. And I ran that program for about 12 years. And I'm now a consultant and educator. I do a lot of work with AM Skyer. And as Howie so nicely mentioned, with camp leaders working on Camp Collab. And then I luckily at Tri-State about, I don't know, 14 years ago, something like that, I met my wife, Pam. So there is love in Atlantic City, everybody. It's not just the beautiful casinos. There is love there. And we met at Tri-State and have been together ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jonathan Gold,
that was it.
Yeah, Jonathan Gold mentioned twice in that origin story. Jonathan, a former guest on the show, which is nice to hear.
I know.
Yeah, it's awesome. Wow, that is a very fulsome origin story. So Kelly, that's pretty good, eh?
Yeah, very good A. I like it. I like the A in there. You're a little
I had to throw that in.
Canadian A. It was great. I like all those details, and what a cool path. And even the love at Tri-State, maybe you just inspired, a
You never know.
little romance at Tri-State. I mean, focus on why you're there, people, professionals.
Exactly.
Right. I mean,
Never know.
Focus.
I mean, it was at a Gaga tournament put on by the Epic Group at Bally's of all places. I mean, it doesn't get more romantic and camp than that.
Gaga
Yeah.
at Bally's?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get the mental picture. It's going to take me a moment. That's a lot, but
Yeah.
that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Well, you would definitely have a lot to share with us based just on that origin story. So I'm super excited for this.
We'll get some tidbits throughout the conversation. So today's conversation is centered around creating high performance teams. This idea that given the uniqueness of what we do year in and year out, and how do we, whether you're creating something from the beginning, you're starting something new and building a team, or you have a well-established team, I think a lot of us are constantly thinking about it. So I think to kick things off, Dave, like this topic, from your perspective, why should camp owners and directors be constantly, assessing or readdressing the topic of the high performance team? I think that your perspective to get us going will be really important.
So, for me, it's about paying more attention. We spend so much time, like Howie mentioned it earlier about he's well into the hiring process. We were just in the UK and Pam and I did a hiring fair, right? We've never done hiring fairs in November, I don't think. That's really early. And we spend all this time hiring and spending time and on the phone and developing these teams. And then we hope they show up in May or June. And then we hope they do a good job. And we spend a lot of time on our staff training and or orientation, whatever you call it at your camp. And then we just we hope we did a good job and we say, okay, let's see what happens. And I think a lot of us are willing to take the approach of, we're going to lose some people along the way. We just have to get through the summer, right? By like week 2 or 3, if you're a residential camp or a day camp, you're kind of like, all right, let's just hang in there. We can do it. We're going to make it. And I think there's a lot that we could be doing differently and with more intention that makes those teams a little bit stronger. So we're not as worried and we're not as stressed, because even though we're saying to ourselves, well, we just need this number of people to make it through the summer, I think we can do better than that. I also have felt over the past few years, there's been this focus on what's wrong with generation whatever that you're referring to. I think we spend too much time on the negative. And Howie was at my session. I started at Collab. I did a session. I started with, name all the great things about the staff that work at your camp. That was my opening line, right, Howie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Was, what are some great things? Because we spend so much time on all the negatives and trying to combat the negative or feel better about talking about it. I don't really know, and I think we focus on the positive, and there's a lot of positive. I mean, that question elicited probably 20 or 30 responses from the room of all the positives about the staff at our camp, and we should be harnessing that and using it to our advantage. that's kind of where I got started with all of this.
Yeah, I think that exactly that. And I think it's easy given some of the frustrations. And I know Kelly and I've talked about this of being let down at the worst possible time by a young person that you had so much excitement for, or potential, saw so much potential that, they bailed on you, or they didn't rise to the occasion. And that happens. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes it creates a cynicism in all of us that doesn't allow us to kind of bounce back and just generally give a little more credit to this generation and their capacity to really shine. And I liked what you said at the beginning, Dave, is like, sometimes we're in this mode of, okay, we need this number of staff, let's get to the number. And sometimes we can easily lose track of, once you get the number, how do we create a sense of belonging or commitment and all those things. Kelly, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit too.
Well, I also think there's a little bit of going along with what you said is, there is the get this many number of staff. And then I think not everyone, I'm making a broad spectrum, and it's not everyone, but I think a lot of camps or individuals in that then do this. Like, okay, I hope that they show up. I hope it works out, or, it just feels like this sucking in of breath of, okay, now that I have the number of employees, I hope this works out. So I'm hoping what you'll share a little bit is how to not maybe have that gasping or that holding of breath up until, your camp starts. So how we can relieve some of that stress, anxiety, for camp individuals. And I also love that you started with the positive of what are the great things, because there are so many great things. And you can either, you can harness that, like you said, or you can continue to feel frustration. So it's like two choices, right? So
Yeah. And something going back to something Howie kind of said in passing about what happens if somebody leaves, right? Or doesn't live up to expectations or whatever, they don't fulfill their obligation. That's going to happen, right? There is no stopping that. And it doesn't matter whether you work at camp, you work at Goldman Sachs, you work at Amazon, you work at Google, wherever you work, no matter how high performing of an organization it is, no matter how much money they have, people are going to let you down. What I believe, though, is that if we do a better job about building the rest of our team, that when that person doesn't live up to their expectations, there's other people who are going to make up for that, who are going to step up to the plate, who are going to do better to fill that void, and it has less of an impact, right? So you're already kind of planned, you know it's going to happen, and we have to stop like harping on it and just accept it. And it's no different. I always say people are, I don't like talking about generational things.
Right.
I don't like labeling, but when people say, well, the staff today aren't what they were. Well, I say, well, that's exactly what people said about you. That's exactly what people said about the people that talked about you, right? You could go back generation to generation to generation. That has always been the case, right? And it's going to keep happening, right? We always have this perception that nobody's as good as we were, or right? It's just the way we are. I don't know the science behind it necessarily, but this has been a constant conversation. It's not new, and we just need to accept it and kind of, I hate to say it, but move on a little bit.
Yeah. When you think of, yeah, go ahead, Kelly, please.
Oh no, Howie, you go ahead.
No, all you.
So I had a question, Dave, about kind of setting up this conversation. Is your theory, idea, intentionality of building those great teams, is that, you talked about during the hiring process, is it a full year cycle? Is it more in this time of building? Is it more during the summer what you do to make sure that those people can support when someone leaves? So talk to me a little bit about when, you're really focused on this, or is it all the time?
It's all the time. It should be from the interview to the moment you give them an offer to when they accept the offer. It has to be constant. It's got to be consistent. It's, really well intentioned. we can't hire somebody in November. I mean, there are people who are hiring people in September, right? You can't say, okay, we'll talk to you in March. Good luck at school. We'll be in touch. It's not what current staff are used to, right? Think about, before we started, Kelly, reminded me to turn my phone off, right? Turn off your notifications, turn your phone off. If you said that to somebody a little bit younger, they would maybe freak out a little bit, right? Because they're used to all these touch points all day, every minute of the day, waking up. I mean, we do it too. I'm sure everybody in this call does it too. Wake up. What did I miss? Go to your phone, go to your favorite app that you want to read, whatever it is, whether it's sports, gossip, news, whatever it is. They're so they're used to this constant flow of information. So you're talking about young people who you're going to hire them in September and not talk to them till March, or maybe once in a while they get a newsletter, or they see an Instagram post once in a while. Can't wait for you to be here. Whatever it is, that's not going to be enough for them. It's just not. And on some of the positive, the staff today, and whatever age range you want to talk about it, they love to know what's going on. They want the information, right? When I was younger and we went through my story a little bit, I didn't really care what else was going on at camp. But there was also no internet. There was no information was processed differently, right? And we had access to information differently. And I just cared about what's my job, and are we going to hang out after camp, and how do we coordinate that, right, over the phone. Now they want to know how camp works. They want to know the impact of their jobs, right? There's a social impact to it. There's so many pieces to it. They're really invested and really interested. And it's not just a summer job. It's something they view as impactful for them, for kids, for the world. And I think that's super admirable. And we need to give them more information.
Well, I do believe that one of the things that resonated with me when you were speaking about this was what you've just mentioned. This idea of getting to know your staff is it's multi-layered, right? It's one thing to get to know them personally, and being able to have people within your camps who can make personal connections with the people who are you're onboarding or hiring, etc. But this other layer that you're touching on is just getting to know how they tick, what they like, how do they absorb or take in information. Because I'm reminded within my own organization about the length of a email communication, the value of a text versus an email, and how much should the video of Howie welcoming everyone to camp, how long should that be, because they're on to the next thing as they multitask in ways that we never even imagined multitasking, to take in media or take in information. I'm curious, Dave, about some of your thoughts just related to not only their need to get information, but the various forms in which they welcome getting that information.
Yeah, so I'll say, Howie, what you said was great about changing the way you communicate as you're onboarding and the way the messaging is. But then what drives me absolutely crazy is you've done that all year, and then they get to staff training, and not you personally, because you would never do this, Howie, I know you, but you sit them in a room for 45 minutes and lecture to them.
Right.
So you've spent 8 months, I don't know, 6 months, whatever it is, being super intentional and super thoughtful about length of message and type of message and how the message is broadcast. And then they show up to camp and they're sitting in a classroom for 8 days or however long your staff training is. And it drives me, I mean, they give up. They're going to say, well, wait a second, I've been duped. I thought they understood me, but they really don't, right? These people in charge really don't get it. Like, why am I sitting here? Right? This is boring. I thought this was camp. This isn't fun. And I know listen, I work for an insurance company, part of my life. I understand we have to teach certain things and there's risk involved and all of that. but there's ways of approaching that information that makes it much more palatable. So that's something that I just wanted to address, because I think you could be as well intentioned as you can until June or May, and then you kind of blow it because you go back to this old version of, let's sit in a classroom, let's sit in a room and look at a screen, which is so against everything that they want. So I think, Howie, when we were together a couple of weeks ago, I kind of broke it down into a few different areas of, I think, of what I called, so it's a common understanding, right? So this idea of common understanding, I think this is where you were leading me. So first is, you've got to ask them a lot more questions, right? And it starts with, who are they and what are they capable of? So it's really this kind of bottom up approach, right? Get to know them first. Show them that you care about their interests and what they want, and then start giving them the information that way, right? The things that they're interested in. Being super clear about what their roles and responsibilities are going to be, right? And like just really breaking it down. So there's almost no questions, right? Here's exactly what you have to do. And then how their goals, right? I talked about just a few minutes ago about their goals, right? Impacting the world, social impact, making a difference. How does your organization fit their goals, right? You can't make them change. They have to line up with what you want, and you have to line up with what they want. And if it's not a good match, I know we have to get, like you said, and Kelly said, the number, right? We got to get to this number. But if the goals don't meet up from the beginning, they're never going to meet up. If their goal for the summer is not in line with your mission and values of your organization, you're wasting your time and your breath and their time, because you don't want them taking a job that doesn't feel right for them. And it's something we say during the hiring process is, I want you to work somewhere where you feel good. And if you don't, you should find someplace else to work. You'll find someplace. There's plenty of jobs. There's plenty of places. And then the last piece of that is really how they like communication, how they like to interact. I always talk about it from a educator perspective, is how they like to learn. Some people love to learn in a 45-minute lecture series. Some people do not. And you can't do everything for everybody. But if you show, like, some of our things at staff training were lecture based, like you like, but some of these were a little bit more active, like this other person likes. They're getting a piece of what they like, and show that you listened. And you could even say, hey, Howie, guess what I did? I set this session up just for you, because I know when we talked, you like to learn this way. Wait till you see this one, right? So really, those are the first kind of 4 steps that I would look at.
I feel like I'm hearing more and more, especially after the recent ACA Staffing Summit, about what you said, being super clear about what their roles and responsibilities are going to be, like so very specific about what a good counselor looks like, or what your expectations are of what they'll do in points of, all parts of the day. But that's interesting that you bring that up, because more and more I'm hearing that, of being even more clear than we ever thought we were before about exactly what doing their job and doing a good job looks like, so that they know when they are doing that or not doing that. And you do too. But so I'm intrigued that you're bringing that up too. And that just seems like a common theme lately.
And I would take it a step further, Kelly, giving them the chance to opt out right then and there, right? Saying, if you're super clear from the beginning, this is exactly what it looks like, feels like, the expectations are, does that work for you? And they could opt in or they could opt out, starting in whatever day that you hire them. And when they get there and it's exactly what you said it was going to be, and they're unsure, you have some ammunition, right? And you could say, well, we did talk about it, and I was really clear with you, and we sat on a Zoom or in person, you nodded your head, you said, yes, I understand. This is exactly what I want to do. I get it. I know it's going to be hard. So here we are. And if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. But here's a lesson. in understanding, right, that you made a commitment and I gave you everything up front. I didn't hide anything from you. So you can walk away if you want and I'll still respect you, but you have to understand that you're not going to probably ever have a boss or potential boss give you this much information beforehand.
Mhm,
And your decision making process has to kind of go along with that.
mhm.
So it's really important.
I like
And I,
that. One of my favorite parts of the interview. Oh, sorry, Howie.
no,
It's one of my favorite parts of the interview where we give them, a guide before the second interview and reading through. But I really like that part of the interview where I go through our expectations and then like what you can expect from us and what we expect from you, both ways, and telling them like, I want you to know exactly what you're getting into. So if I call you and I offer the job, you can very clearly be, yes, I absolutely want to work here and I am on
Mhm.
board with this, or no. And that's okay. It is okay to say, I heard what you had to say and I thought about that and I read through your information and no, thank you, because you want them to be successful, but being so clear about what that is, what that looks like, and giving them an out, like it's okay to say
yeah.
no, you know?
I almost feel, and I agree with all of that, Kelly, and I think that's a great, amazing approach. I also think that we have some new marketing material from Dave too. It's almost like you'll never have a boss like your first camp jobs boss kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
think there's something to be said for that. I think about all of us who are selling so hard what this kind of work experience can set you up for, and we all do, and we go beyond what virtually every other place of employment does in every aspect of sensitivity to adapting it to their individual needs, to the communication that we do. I mean, we're all doing varying degrees of um, all of that wonderful communication. And it made me also think that this could be part of the selling of this. Well, if you're choosing the local fast food joint, I can guarantee when you're having a problem, they're not going to be there for you the way the leaders in this setting will be. And I think we're all kind of revamping how we may kind of communicate that. I also think, Dave, too, something that I've been kind of leaning on as part of an exit survey strategy
Mm.
for our staff at the end of the summer is the way that Howie or the team set you up for this experience. Did it live up to what you thought it would be? Like, I think, I know our organization's gotten some really good feedback about some things that were really gratifying to hear, but some things that were quite eye-opening, particularly about I remember getting this. My daughter Jordana always reminds me of this. This one year we got literally the same quote. I had no idea how much I had to be on, right? In quotations, right? And I think that in the world of work, when you think of what the flow of a typical shift at work, camp is like no other. So to the degree that we can set them up for how much they have to be on, I know that we've had to do some, rethinking of how we really portray what a typical work day will look like. But I think it's all of that, and it speaks to knowing the kind of information that they thrive on receiving and how that really sets them up for success.
I would take it even a step further, Howie. I think it's great you do it as an exit piece. I would do it day 3 if you can.
Right.
Day
Yeah.
4. Okay, so you just went through staff training. The kids have been here 3 or 4 days. Did we do it? Did we meet your expectations? Is it working? What did we miss? What are you struggling with?
Yeah.
And then you can take care of it before you get to the end.
Hmm.
Right? So you can say,
Yeah.
"Oh, wow, like, oh, uh-oh, we need to get everybody in a room, whether it's at a staff meeting or individually in smaller groups, and reinforce this because maybe we missed it. Maybe we didn't do a great job." Because I think, I'm not discounting Howie at all what you said. I think you
Mm.
have to do those kind of exit pieces. But I think if you can get it sooner, you're going to fix a lot of problems. And it doesn't have to be everybody all at once. You have I'm assuming that most people on this who are listening have leadership teams and different levels of leadership throughout their camp. You can let those people take care of it, right? You don't have to address everybody all at once. But if you're getting this feedback 3 or 4 days in and you're reading it and you're seeing these themes of, oh wow, did we not cover that enough, or was it not clear? You can then instruct those leadership like, hey, during one of your meetings, or try and find a time to pull your people together and just reinforce this and make it
Yeah.
clearer. Imagine the power in that. And I would imagine that most people listening are not doing that, but it's pretty easy exercise that you could do. Just asking a few questions about how staff training, and you could do it day 3, and then you could do it again day 6, right? How often you can do it whenever you want. You're in charge. It's your, kind of like how Howie was saying, right? We are not the fast food joint. We create our own worlds. We can do whatever we want because we're not part of this bigger organization. So we can ask all the questions we want to ask and make all the changes we want to make. It's really a beautiful part, I think, of camp, is this kind of personal attention, not just for campers, but for staff also.
I
Right.
love that, because guess what? You just fixed my idea for me, Dave, because we've been talking about like our first couple of days at camp are really considered training. And we just talked at our first leadership team meeting about, okay, how can we really also create more training during those days when they're with kids in the beginning for staff? And so we're trying to go through exercises of how can we meet as a big staff after camp beyond our normal circle up time and really debrief the day and what they still aren't understanding, what they need. But when you said break into smaller teams, I'm like, oh, maybe I can pull away like my second and third grade counselors and then my four, like, so bring them into segments. And then as a big group, maybe any commonalities we saw or heard, address those as a big staff in our circle up. But I think
Yeah.
we always think about how do we, because at staff training, we're all together. So I think I always think about like continual training through the summer that we all have to come together, but maybe we don't all have to come together for that. It can be in different segments. So I love that just shift of, oh, we can break it into different groups of staff. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
just like regular training.
And if you're really ambitious and you see that there's the same 3 or 4 people have the same answer, right? You can just pull those 3 or 4 people and say, listen, I noticed you all had the same piece that you seem to be missing. Here's 15 minutes of up training and reminding or clarification. And it could just be a group of 3 or 4 people. It doesn't even have to be 20 people. So you can really make it as big or as small as you want to, as long as you're doing it.
Yeah. And I think that, in light of this part of our conversation, this concept, or this really embracing the on-the-job training aspect of what we do, and that I think that the success of not feeling that everything is done at the end of staff training before the kids come, that it's constantly, which I'd like to tee you up for, Dave, because I know some of the topics that I really wanted to get into with you. But this is this generational thing of feeling the need to be perfect, which is something that I think is so generational right now. And one of the things that I enjoyed in about this topic you delivered earlier was the notion of psychological safety. This idea that the success of teams as it relates to creating an environment of that kind of safety. Maybe you can just elaborate on that and some of the things you're seeing that camps are doing and could be doing better to, get further along sort of that concept.
Yeah, so this is like my new idea that I'm really passionate about over the past few weeks, actually, few months, is this idea of psychological safety and what that means. Now, even though I am now Dr. Dave, I am not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. My dad was a psychiatrist before he retired, not helpful at all in any way. So I just want to preface that this is not coming from a trained psychologist. But really, for me, psychological safety is really, how are we making camp safe for making mistakes? And I'm actually proposed a session, and I've been reading a book by Amy Edmondson. So if anybody's looking for a good read, her name's Amy Edmondson. It's called The Right Kind of Wrong, and it's called The Science of Failing Well. So I had a conversation about this earlier today. Since Michael Jordan came into the NBA, hopefully everybody knows who Michael Jordan is. There's this myth, right, about him not making his high school varsity team. and how that led him to try even harder. And he became a good in college, but even in college, he wasn't great, or whatever it is. And then that's how he became a superstar. This whole like learning from your mistakes, or you have to fail to succeed. Well, these cliches, I think, are actually really hurting people because we're not giving them the right tools. We're just saying it, to be honest. We're just saying, like, oh, failure's fine. If you fail, it's okay. You'll learn something from it. But we're not facilitating that learning in any way. So, psychological safety to me is really like teaching them the skills to fail in the right way, which is what Amy Edmondson writes a lot about. And really, that leads them to be able to take risks. Because if they know how to deal with failure, and it's not like, oh, don't worry, you'll fail, but you'll succeed later on, but an actual like way to make sense of all of that, it's going to change, and it gives them some place to ask questions, to make mistakes safely, to take safe risks. And then another huge piece of it for me is giving them constructive ways to disagree with each other. So you have people, especially at resident camps, who are living together with a bunch of kids. Some are activity specialists, some are general punk counselors. That sometimes can be a pretty tough relationship when you have, late teens, early 20s people living in this very stressful environment, division of labor, trying to take care of kids, but also have fun. And they're going to disagree with each other. It's just bound to happen. It's human nature, it's natural. But how do you teach them to do that constructively? Right? How do you say, you know what? Not don't ever disagree with each other. You're one team, right? We're all in this together, right? Whatever language you're using. Instead, saying, okay, you're going to disagree with each other. That's fine. How do we deal with that? How do we make it a constructive outcome? Because you're not all the same. We're hiring you all for your different personalities and different abilities and different backgrounds. And we want you to get along with each other, but it's not going to be perfect all the time. That's also part of life, right? We have to learn that we're not all going to get along. And I think, the world around us kind of teaches us that. So how do you provide space and information for them to be able to do that? So that's my new kind of psychological safety and putting those things in place at camp. I think there was a second part to that question you asked me, Howie. So some things that camps I see are doing well is, the easy answer is providing more support, whether that's a professional at camp, right? So not just for campers, but for staff also, whether that's through somebody on site, right? Some sort of social worker or mental health professional, or providing them with access to something like, one of these online counseling services, whatever it might be, and really pushing that and saying, listen, we're here for you, we can help you. Providing a person on staff who's kind of a mediator between staff that helps them come to terms with these disagreements and how to do that. I think that's a constructive way to do it, but I think we can do it ourselves too. I think if we take some of the information that people like myself or others are trying to share at some of these conferences and situations like this, when we're given the opportunity, is to go look outside of camp, which is a lot of what I do. And what are other people doing in corporate environments, in other businesses that we can then move into our environments and make sense for us to help our staff do better. And one of the things that I talked about in our when you heard me speak is really leaning on your leadership team. And I had this 4-question exercise that's super simple. And it's asking your staff 4 questions, but letting your leadership team do this because they're really the ones, and Howard and I talked about this a bit, they're really the ones who are like, should be on the front lines having these conversations. 4 really simple questions that you have staff write down the answers. Give them some time to reflect on it. I am at my best when. I am at my worst when. You can count on me. And what I need from you is 4 really simple questions. And you learn so much about that person just with those 4 questions. You also then have all of this conversation starters as a leadership team member, right? When you see somebody is not feeling psychologically safe, say, listen, Dave, I have your piece of paper here where you wrote that you're at your worst when, and it seems like that might be happening. How can I fix it for you?
Mhm.
Right? Sometimes the exercise is just, and don't tell the staff this, hopefully no staff are listening. The exercise again is getting them back to that point of, do my values match up with the organization values, and do they care about me? Right? And doing something like that, oh my gosh, they're asking me these questions. Like, I might not know the answers as a staff, like they might not be able to answer them, but at least they're, I mean, nobody's ever asked them these questions before. I always say it's either their like therapist if they have one, or their rabbi, priest, other, depending on their religion. Those are the
Mhm.
only people who ever ask them questions like that. Their boss, if they've ever had a boss before, or if they ever have a boss after, not asking these kind of questions.
And I would say also that at a time where all of us are probably hiring more unfamiliar people with the camp experience just in general, never
Mm-hmm.
been to camp, didn't grow up at camp, saw a movie about camp, I think it's this, whatever the case may be. And they have, as you said, sort of this kind of, they grew up with this notion of what a supervisor in the workplace, how they relate to you. I've seen it myself, and we've all seen it, how someone walks away from just simply being asked that question and they're like, oh my gosh, like they said they cared, but they actually do care, and this is what they did to show that they cared. And I think that this overall message, Dave, about psychological safety just is an incredible motivator to stick with it and know that there's going to be hard times, but you have good people around you to help you through it. And I do agree as well as that, for the boss or the owner to ask those questions is not going to facilitate the kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. You have to have some really awesome people on the ground who are in it with those staff that they can see as those supports as well. And I think a lot of us are doing that. So that's a really awesome
Yeah,
one.
and then you're trusting those people, right?
Right.
To manage these staff, and you're really putting a lot in their hands, which they want, right?
Hmm.
They want that
Hmm.
responsibility. They don't want Howie or Kelly or Dave walking around interfering all the time. They want to be the ones who have the information, right? Have the connection, can fix the problem. And when they really can't fix the problem, then they'll come to you, right? To
Yeah.
one of us. But until then, they have all the ammunition they need. They can handle it.
So if do you have suggestions for us, since people apparently don't want Howie and I interfering, in a good way. Thank you for that. We need to be told that sometimes.
We sure
Uh,
do.
so yep, since I'm, Joe Biden right now for my camp, and I'm building that infrastructure of more leadership team members and another level of entering emerging leaders, are there advice or suggestions that you have for individuals like Howie and I, or anyone listening, about, or what should I be thinking about if I'm trying to build this high performing team and I'm bringing on new leadership? Do you have any advice or things we should be doing, or is it really just like lean on them, trust them, mentor them, give them, have them be the question askers, and then they come to you and you can be that sounding board?
So I'll go back to learning from your mistakes, which is a phrase I hate, but I'll use it anyway. Uh, I, I've made the mistake probably too many times of just doing things without asking and without getting input. So if you have these great leadership team members and you've built this infrastructure, don't just, what I just talked about, these 4 questions, don't just hand them this piece of paper and say, you have to do this now with every one of your staff members, and here's how it's going to work. That they will not buy in, more than likely, unless you're somehow have this power over them, which is unlikely. Say to them, I have this idea, right? I heard this guy, Dave, he says he's a doctor now. He seemed like, he might know what he's talking about. Not convinced, but there's this guy, he said you should ask these 4 questions of your staff. What do you think about this? How would you use this? Do you feel comfortable doing this? Get them involved in these kind of decisions and these kind of mechanisms, so they feel like they have some skin in the game. Or if you just do it from the top, hi, I'm Kelly. I'm in charge of you. I hired you. I signed your paycheck. Here's what I want you to do, right? 3 days after staff training, you're going to ask them these questions. And then I also want you to do this, and this. They're going to revolt, right? Let them be part of this process. So suggest it, bring it up, and then workshop. Let them help you workshop on how you're going to use these tools. And you're going to get such better results.
Howie, we just got an activity for our retreats, for our leadership retreats. We can just do this with our teams, and then they'll be so well versed in doing it with staff.
Yeah. And one of the things, Dave, I know we talked about a little bit is about, you know, that kind of questioning can only happen if you've kind of established rapport and an understanding of what your environment is all about. And one of the things that we talked about is the storytelling of camp, the benefits of people who have come before them and what they gained from this experience, and the workshopping of the leadership team members to deliver that has to come strategically at a point where you've kind of made huge inroads for them understanding what this place is all about and what it has meant for summers year in and year out. And I'd like to maybe just to speak to the importance of, you know, the building of team by them understanding what they're part of, because we all do it in our own way, and we send out the historical video and we say, read this page on our history and all that stuff. But it feels like, as we discussed early on in our discussion about, you know, you have these people connected to you for 8 months. Don't wait to the month before pre-camp to tell them a little bit about why this building is called this or why this person did this. Maybe you can just elaborate on some of that, because I'm a big believer in that as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, we live in a world. I mean, look what we're doing right now, right? We set up a time to be on Zoom for an hour, and 3 people who live in 3 different places, 2 who have never met, right, can have this conversation for an hour. It's super easy. So you have people who have gone through your camp, right? Everybody has people, right? Unless you started your camp last summer. Everybody's got some history, right? Everybody's got somebody who benefited from your camp. Say to those people, listen, you were such a huge part of camp. I know you've moved on now, you know, like the CEO of whatever company. You know, if you want to donate some t-shirts, great, but that's not why I'm calling, right? I would love for you, and I'm going to get 3 other people to get on this Zoom on Tuesday at 6 p.m. with these 20 new staff members that I've hired since October. And I just want you to tell them either the story of what camp meant to you. I want you to tell them the story of a camper, a success story about a camper. Just tell them stories. That's all I want you to do. And you don't have to say anything else. Just the impact of those stories will mean more than handing out a sheet of paper about the history of camp, right? Or, you know, a blog about why we named this building. Having 4 real people who have really been impacted or impacted others at camp, you cannot beat that. I mean, you think about how much money companies pay for advertising, right? To get these stories out. You don't have to pay anything because they paid you to come to camp, right? You might have paid them if they were staff members, but you don't have to pay them again. So yeah, send them a t-shirt, right? Howie, send them one of those really nice sweatshirts you were wearing in the UK, right? Like, or a sticker. It doesn't matter. They'll be happy to do it. And don't wait, right? Don't wait until May. If you have, like I said, you have 20 people that you've hired since October, tell those 20 people on, I don't know, December 1st, 6 p.m., please be on this Zoom. I'm going to have 4 really special people who are going to talk to you. And you don't have to do any prep. Those people will know what story they're going to tell. I could tell you the story right now, right? That I could tell. I think I told it. It's about Justin, right? One of my first campers who had Down syndrome, who I helped when I was 15 get his head in the water. Goosebumps every time I tell the story, right? And I have hundreds of those stories probably that I could tell. Super impactful, doesn't take any effort, but you have to do it. That's the key.
Mhm.
And those people who are listening, who you've hired, who've never been to camp, people you were talking about, Howie, never been to camp, never seen camp, doesn't even matter what camp looks like at that point. They're going to say, oh my gosh, that's the power, right? That's the power that either I have or I'm going to get, or that's the influence that I can create. I mean, you don't have to do anything else. That's all you need to do. And we all know it because we all live it. But sometimes it's hard to look at it that way because we are in it and live it and believe it. You've got to get these other people to believe it also.
Mhm. I knew you'd like that part, Kelly.
Right. How do you know? Because I'm just sitting here nodding my head and like,
No,
I'm
no, no. I just know I just know that is a big part of your kind of superpower about getting people hooked into all the stuff you're creating, and you love that stuff, and it's so powerful. And I know we're all doing it in various ways, but I like the fact that we're just speaking to it because we're recognizing that it can work to your advantage in just allaying any doubt or second guessing the decisions people are making, or we're all in this position where we've got commitments from all these young, great, enthusiastic, skilled people who are just want to come to camp, but we all worry about that next offer. And if we can just do stuff to make them stop in their tracks and say, no, I know what I'm getting into. And I think this last example of the things we can do just really help us further our chances of people sticking with what they say they're going to do. And I just think it's a very powerful piece, and it's something that I know that I'm going to give a lot of thought to even more.
And think about what I started with about values aligning.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're sitting on this call with these 4 people talking about camp and the magic and what it's done, and that meets up with the values of the people on that call, the 20 people you've hired, they're hooked because their fast food job that they might be thinking about, or their job at Target or wherever they're thinking about working, they can't compete with that. There's no way Target's values for their job stocking shelves or working the register is going to meet the same way that their values meet with those people who have gone through camp. It's just impossible. We've won, I think. I'd like to think we won.
Yeah.
Professor, do you think that that's going to hit the same if it's live via Zoom, or if you threw it out to your alum and you asked them to like send you a quick video snippet about like the impact that camp had on them, whatever. And I'm asking for a friend who might have done this during their new staff orientation last year. But I'm wondering if it hits the same live or how we like slice them all together. So do you have, and I'm okay with either answer. This isn't a pressure thing that I did it not as good, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not a judgmental person, and I think whatever works best for you. But I think, listen, if you could do this over Zoom during the year, but then just imagine that you could bring some of those people to camp during staff training and be in a room and not a video screen, not a tape thing, but imagine the impact. And those people would love to do it because they want to come back to camp and look for their name wherever and have a meal or, relive the magic, whatever it is. Imagine those people. Imagine if you saw those people over Zoom throughout the year and then they showed up to camp. Imagine that, right? Going back to something Howie and I spoke about earlier about you do all of these things during the year and then you put them in a room during staff training and lecture to them for 45 minutes. Same idea. Imagine if you could make it come to life, right? It's kind of like now Disney started doing these live action movies instead of so they'll do a cartoon version and now live action. I think they do it for the same reason, right? They're pulling at your heartstrings and money, but probably. But
yeah,
think about that. Like it's real life. So I think if you can only do it through video because it's the situation you're in, like of course that's great, right? Anything you can do is great. But if you can do it both ways, oh man, unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to break apart or not break apart. Do you have time for one quick question? How I'm going rogue, but I want to know if you can unpack it really quick. Is this okay?
It's your show.
Well, I know it's yours too. We're 50-50 partners.
I
Okay,
mean, Howie
Professor.
did say that I'm not getting paid for this, which I didn't understand when I started, but I guess I'll still answer the question. Sure.
I'm really glad you took the heat for that one. Thank you, Howie. Okay, Professor, really quick, just because I
Yeah.
think people are going to be curious when you've talked about this twice, which I love, but now I'm a curious person. I want to know, you have said to us twice about not having them sit for 45 minutes at training, like a sit and get. So do you have any quick thoughts on how do we not do that? Because I do that sometimes. My staff
Yeah.
says the gym floor, their butt hurts from sitting on there too long. So
Yeah.
it's like my consent and mandated reporter session. It's my, so how do we stop doing that? Give us like 2 tidbits about how we stop doing that so much.
Well,
Professor.
first of all, somebody who does those consent mandated reporter talks, you have to do those. So that's not one I would cut out. But I think you can break things down into smaller chunks. I think they can be 15 minutes. I think they can be 20 minutes. I think you can do all sorts of different creative ways of doing it, but some of them are going to, but I think you have to lay the expectations out. Let me start there, where you say to people, when you're asking them, how do you like to learn as part of your onboarding process? And people say, well, I learn best, when I'm walking around and having a conversation, right? A walking meeting. I think that's what they call them, right? Walking meeting, right? Okay. If you lay out the expectation and say, ahead of time, before they get there, you send out a note to all of your staff. Here's what staff training is going to look like. We're going to have a few sessions that are 45-minute, like your traditional classroom setting, because there are topics that are really important and it's the way we have to do it. We're also going to do about 5 that are just walking and talking in small groups. Then we're going to do 3 things that are just, we're going to take a hike into the woods, and then we're going to do a reflection piece when we get to the top of the mountain, whatever it is, right? But you set those expectations up ahead of time so they know what's coming and they can prepare themselves. So those people who really don't like those 45-minute sessions can say to themselves, okay, there's 30 sessions that are going to happen, and you have to be this specific. I'm just, but the 5 of them are going to be sessions that I don't love, but I understand that we have to do them, rather than them getting there and not knowing what's going to happen. The surprise element, I think, sometimes is the worst part of it. I think that makes it really, really hard. I also think that whatever you're doing, going back to something Howie said early on, is if you're using certain language or imagery or whatever it is over Instagram or Facebook groups or WhatsApp or group me's or whatever you're doing to keep them engaged during the year, use that same imagery and language during staff training. It's like subliminal messaging, because they're not going to pick it up during the year necessarily or all of it. But when they see it again during staff training and it's repeated, oh yeah, I remember seeing that. I get it now. That makes sense, right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You're going to be repetitive. You're going to show the same things. You're going to deliver the same message, but smaller chunks, differentiating instruction, which is like a big buzzword in the education world now, right? Everybody learns differently. And like I said, and be honest with them. I know that you don't love traditional learning, whoever you are. I get it. I respect that. We're going to have a mix of things because we have a mix of personalities and a mix of learning ideas. So if you're okay with it, we're going to do some of what you really love. And then we're going to do some things that we're going to ask you to kind of like do your best to get through. And that's how I would handle it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just was curious because I wanted a little staff training tidbit.
No problem.
Awesome.
Really good.
All right. It's always hard to stop, Dave and Howie, because the information is just so good, but it is time to be time friendly and time management. So it's time for us, Dave, to move on to our inspiration part of our podcast. So we always end our show with something that's inspiring you, whether it's a book, podcast, show, movie, something someone said to you or did, maybe something from the Camp Collab conference. So we'll all share and then we'll put it in the show notes of what that is. I can start off, and I am going to go back to a book that I read a long time ago, not a long time ago, but it's Good to Great by Jim Collins. And I'm going back to it because I was talking with my friend Liz, shout out to Tumbleweed Date Camp, and we were talking about staff who maybe struggled last year and that have them back, not have them back. And he has 7 great questions in there to ask yourself about that staff member. And so I'm going to go back to those and read them. There's such like, does this person have a value problem, a skill problem, or a will problem? Do they see what they're doing as a job or a responsibility? What's this person's relationship to the window, like blame, or the mirror, taking responsibility? So it just reminded me of a great exercise of questioning myself and our leadership team and just going through the exercise. So mine is Jim Collins' Good to Great book. Howie, do you want to go next?
Sure. I just was recently part of a small group workshop where we did the Clifton Strengths Assessment. I don't know if you're familiar with the Clifton Strengths Assessment. It's just a reflective piece. It's an online exercise to identify your tendencies and your strengths and how it's applied to working within a group and recognizing and identifying where you're at related to the people you work closest with. And it was incredibly enlightening. I hadn't done something like that recently. Oddly enough, when I was with Dave recently, we did some other exercises related to examining our leadership styles too. So I've been in this world of kind of self-reflection in terms of my tendencies, my approach, the things I'm thinking about as a leader, and in the role that I have now these days at camp. But I just found the Clifton Strengths Assessment to be really a great exercise. I don't know if anyone's done it recently or want to incorporate it into their small leadership teams or anything like that. I'm a big fan now. I loved it. And I just wanted to just throw it out there as a fun thing that I just recently did.
Awesome. Thank you, Howie. What about you, Dave?
All right, so I really tried to prepare for this answer, I promise, but I am too easily inspired. I have a really hard time of not thinking about camp when I'm doing anything. So probably my first session, one of my first sessions I ever did at a conference was based off of the movie Whiplash. If anybody's familiar, I was a drummer growing up, and it was a snowy day here in Philly. I might have gone in the afternoon to our small independent movie theater. I was working from home independently. It was fine. And I went to watch the movie, and somewhere like 3/4 of the way in, the teacher says to the drummer, good job were the 2 most dangerous words in the English language. And I almost got up and left because I had to write down how that made me think about camp. So that's where I started my inspiration. So if anybody ever saw me speak like 10 years ago, I was talking about not saying great job all the time and really getting more goals focused and goals oriented. My latest inspiration is a lot of this psychological safety piece that I've been looking at. But I also, as we mentioned earlier, I just finished my doctorate. I wrote my dissertation, and one of my inspirations for that was super obscure, nothing to do with camp. A gentleman by the name of Brad Olson, and he wrote a book about teachers, and it was called Teacher Identity, and really focused on. It's called Teaching for Success: Developing Your Teacher Identity in Today's Classroom. So the majority of the book has absolutely no bearing on anything that we do, but he has in the back an exercise for teachers to talk about their personal narratives, their personal history, and how that personal history informs their professional identities and how those two match up. So you'll notice throughout today's talk, I talked a lot about values and matching staff values, but this is where it's all coming from. So really that was a huge moment for me in writing my dissertation, was how can we learn more about where people come from, what their stories are, what their experiences are, and help them develop their professional identities. And a professional identity to me does not have to be just for a full-time employee. It can be for our seasonal staff. Who do they see themselves as? What kind of impact are they going to have? And how do their experiences inform how they're going to approach their job? So that's probably, and that was a very convoluted, not very well formulated answer because I was all over the place, but I think you got to the point.
Totally. Yes. Thank you for that. And it's true. Like, I think that last part about potentially having our seasonal staff think along those lines could be super powerful in terms of framing their impact, but not only on other people, but the impact the experience has on themselves moving forward to whatever they do, because so many of them will go on to great things themselves. So that's awesome. Dave, this has been a really great discussion. I'm so glad we had you on the show. It hits at a lot of the things that I think a lot of us in the industry are currently talking about. And I think you framed it in a way that really will allow us to move forward. And I really do encourage anybody who's at a professional conference in the future where Dave's going to be at, check out the professor. Very, very great energy in Dave's sessions, and a lot of good stuff, as you can tell from our discussion. So Dave, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
This was fun.
Dave, if people want to connect with you, if there's a way of reaching out after listening to a lot of the knowledge that you've been throwing out today, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Shoot me an email. So it's dave@professordave.camp, because
Nice.
I thought that would be cute. So dave@professordave.camp. Or you can go to my Calendly link and just set up like 30 minutes to chat more. I'm totally open to that. So it's just calendly.com/Professor Dave.
Amazing.
You could look at my website if you want to see funny pictures of me as a kid, but I'm working on updating it. So no judgment, everybody out there in podcast world.
No judgment. I saw the early Dave pictures. They're great pictures with you and your friends. I love them.
Yeah.
Really
My
good. Really good.
counselors.
Yeah, exactly. Kelly, how can our friends get a hold of you?
My email is Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com. Otherwise, Instagram, my page is at KJ Shuna 3, or our camp one is HPR_Insta. What about you, Howie?
You can reach me at howie@camprobinhood.ca, or you can find me on Instagram at Howie Grossinger, or Camp Robin Hood on Instagram. The Canadian Camp Robin Hood, the day camp, is us. So check us out. Please don't forget that you can find all of our show notes and previous episodes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff here from our show and other Go Camp Pro podcasts out there. And there are lots of good ones out there you can check out. But we want you to start here first. Isn't that right, Kelly? They have to start here first, of course. We hope you enjoyed this. Once again, Dave, thanks so much. Thanks for listening, everyone, and can't wait for you to join us on the next episode of the Camp Owners Podcast. Thanks, everybody.